Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
I'd like to introduce you to Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. Dana Beal, one of my mentors from way back in the 80s, is our guest. Fascinating character. But first, let's bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Okay, well, stay tuned for our interview. And if you or a loved one are looking for help finding a medical marijuana doctor anywhere in the United States to recommend medical marijuana, call us. We have a referral service. You can call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. Without further delay, here's our interview with Dana Beal. Well, I'd like to introduce a longtime friend, associate, Dana Beal. Dana Beal was one of the original Yippies, worked with Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, and most of the major cannabis reform marches in the world were founded by Dana Beal and his organization, Cures Not Wars. Dana, in addition to being a longtime marijuana activist, is also probably the leading pioneer of ibogaine treatment for addiction and Parkinson's. So Dana, welcome to Cannabis Common Sense.
I'm happy to be here. I've been looking forward
all
to
these
this.
years. So right now you are in the middle of a battle in Idaho. You want to tell our audience what happened in Idaho?
Well,
by the way,
I was hit
in New York City.
Like
You're
a
city
bad luck
accidents in your whole life.
Ended up being stopped, and we ended up being searched, and they found the pot. And it's a bad state. You have to cross it to get to the other side. And that's Idaho. Kinds of people originate in California or Oregon and drive through that state. It's a nice, busy highway. It's busier than 80. Now, I'm no longer in the across the United States, which is very time consuming. I'm too old. I'm working on ibogaine now, but in some ways it's the same, except that instead of taking 10 days and driving in a car, you're taking 4 days and flying on planes.
Right. And you're going to Africa for the ibogaine,
yeah,
right?
I go to Africa and I get my ibogaine and I sell it to a guy who has 120 people waiting for Parkinson's, reaching them an outrageous amount. I mean, the total is more than $2 million he's going to make. You know what we make on that?
No.
20,000.
I see. Well, that's a pretty small percentage there. So tell us.
Yeah, and he's taking our formulation, which he got from Bob Cisco, and making this stuff. It's ibogaine with 8 milligrams of ibogaine with 12 vitamins. A new and improved version, which has ibogaine plus CBG. So you have ibogaine for dystonia, which is and CBG for tremor. And we want to actually try different things, CBN, THCV, to see which really is we're pretty sure it isn't CBD. That would be too obvious. Like our own Parkinson's pill and sell it. Or to reach out to anybody who's a potential investor that wants to do this breakthrough treatment of Parkinson's, which there is nothing for. ibogaine for heroin addiction. There's just nothing that does that.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I would say it's better than driving weed. So I'm just out of the weed.
Well, so you got busted in Idaho, and they put you, it was like a record cold day, well below zero, as I recall,
It is here.
the day you got. Of course, I had no idea you were in the area, but I got this call from you from jail in a little small town.
Well, I remember your number.
That you remember, you called me so
Yeah, I
much, you
remember
got my
your
number.
number. See, so made perfect sense.
Yeah. So you have been, how many times have you been busted for pot, Dana?
Yeah, well, this is one of the things I'd like to end. I'm trying to get a license here,
Yeah.
the Yippie Museum.
Yeah, but
And
I
if we can
understand
get back,
that
we can so we, huh?
the Great Midwest Marijuana Harvest Fest started as a free Dana Beal event back in 1971. Is that right?
Yep.
And you were in jail for pot during the Yippie Chicago
No,
protest.
no. Well, I was in Canada.
Oh, I see.
And I only
Why
came
were you?
back because I was for pot in Canada. I had to leave Canada. So suddenly I was more hot in Canada than I was in the United States. Anyway, I'd been gone for a while. So I came back and I ended up hooking up with friends that like exactly who I would go to, right? And they came, some provos, some kids in Boston, along with my ex-girlfriend Elaine, maybe 8 months after I left, and they thought I would. Of course, I was not. But I ended up being in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee got in with the White Panthers. And the White Panthers, of course, were John Sinclair's auxiliary white hipster jazz enthusiast, Black Panther auxiliary. And then there was a plan to merge the Panthers with the Yippies. And Abby had already asked me to join the Yippies back in January of '68, long before Chicago, before I went underground. And I was already in the Yippies in a way. And what happened was they group that met, and it was I think it might have been Anita, but I know for sure it was Nancy Kershon and her friends who were the younger Yippies. And we started the Youth International, and they put me on the Central Committee as the field marshal. And that's all I've been doing is field marshaling.
Okay. Well, do you know how many times you've been arrested for marijuana?
We did have our own, I just saw, we had our own Staten Island project. We had equivalent of the Yippie Manhattan Project. And that goes back to a question I asked George McGovern when we were talking about pot, and he said, well, I can't really get behind legalization.
And George McGovern was the Democratic.
See, you're in a town and get weed as a local coke dealer. I said heroin, but say the only place you can get it is a local coke dealer, and you know he has good weed. He also has coke. What is going to happen if you're young, easy to be influenced adult? You try some coke, and they say it wasn't true, but actually, if you do coke, you sometimes end up doing heroin to come down from the coke and be able to sleep. So that lead to heroin. And now we're in the middle of fence. So I'm supposed to meet with somebody representing RFK right now, but I don't think they really have it together. So I'm gonna do this broadcast instead. RFK said he would legalize ibogaine, and we're not asking him to actually schedule it. Merely issue a finding that ibogaine has zero abuse potential, because there's various ways of measuring that. Zero abuse potential, and just tell the DA you have to do something about it because it does not belong in a list consisting of drugs with high potential for abuse. In a way, pot is comparable because you see, it's very hard to abuse a drug that is, which pot happens to be.
I would like to tell the story of how I first came across you, Dana.
Yeah.
I was 21 years old. I just moved to the Pacific Northwest from North Carolina, and I was in Hoquiam, and I went to the library, and there was a new book out by Abby Hoffman, a biography called Soon to Be a Major Motion Picture. And so in that, I knew who Abby Hoffman was. I was very familiar. I'd had a 2-record set of a dramatization of the Chicago conspiracy trial. So that was pretty influential. And I saw this book and I picked it up, and it was a fascinating autobiography by Abby Hoffman. But at the very end, it said, if you want to contact and get in touch with the Yippies, contact Dana Beal at 9 Bleecker Street in New York City. So I sent a letter to 9 Bleecker Street, and I suddenly got inundated with stacks of the Yippie newsletter. It was originally called Yipster Times, but by the time I was there, we're talking 1981 or 82.
It was
called yeah. And so I became a contact in Overthrow at Evergreen State College. And then I helped organize some Rock Against Reagan concerts when the Yippies and others came along with a flatbed truck and a concert stage and put on concerts. I got the permit for the Seattle Center and the Washington State Capitol. At the time, I was the Washington State Normal Coordinator as well. And so where it was at the Seattle Center is now the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame there. Not Hall of Fame, but the Rock and Roll Museum. Or no, the Experience Music Museum. That's what it's called, Experience Music Museum. But we experienced music then. But then I went out in, I guess it was March of 82 to Chicago. And there was a rally in the Lincoln Hotel, I believe, where we met for 2 days and smoked a block of hash. And that's where I met you personally. And you were kind of scary to me at the time. You know, we were in a van with a bunch of older people. And anyway, and we've been connected one way or another ever since. And so there was a period of time where you were incarcerated for quite some time in Wisconsin and Nebraska and Wisconsin. And you were moved from Wisconsin to Nebraska, and you had a massive heart attack. And they took you in and
heart attack before to Nebraska when I was in jail and I was being put to the Wisconsin system. See, I had figured out that if you do your time in Nebraska, it counts against your Wisconsin sentence, but not the other way around. Wow. So I contrived immediately to go there, and then I waived speedy trial.
Well, thank goodness for that.
I'm trying to cut like 5 months off my sentence right now. They're offering 8 months. We want to get off with 3.
That's it.
I have some of the signs of Parkinson's. And it's particularly unfair since I discovered the Parkinson's effect with Bob Sisko, which I said, you know, they have 120 people waiting for treatment just in the Genesis Clinic, and beyond are beginning to do Parkinson's treatments too. You don't use as much for detoxing opiates. Detoxing fentanyl was a bitch, you know. You have to put people weeks, and then you can give them ibogaine. But the fentanyl has to go out of their system. It's horrible shit.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing you're fighting against that. Now, you were being held in the Wisconsin jail from, it was like early or mid-January, right?
Yeah,
When you were busted.
yeah. Because we needed to stop and pee. We
Uh-huh.
stopped
And your
earlier
heart
and not gone into this particular cul-de-sac, which is the thing where you get off and go to a gas station. We just went to the gas station and we got busted for that. Because there was a guy there sitting there who really wanted to go out, but only the state patrol could patrol the interstate. This guy was stuck, and in the whole town, he's out there sitting, trolling for just us.
Uh-huh. What's the name of that town?
Hmm?
What's that town in Idaho?
Oh, the town where I am is Gooding.
Yeah, it's Gooding. So you're in Gooding County, right? It's near
But the other place was Barnabas.
yeah. So eventually we set up a GoFundMe to raise bail money. And by the grace of our friends, Don Wirtschafter in Ohio and the other fellow in Washington, D.C., what's his name?
Adam Idaho.
They signed up that they would cover your $250,000 bail if you didn't show up.
Unfortunately, like Eve of Even the Outlaw, and to give you an idea, these guys are in the same world as Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Uh-huh. I found them on the internet and I contacted them. And they seem
they like put too much pressure on Adam, and Adam now isn't really talking to me, which is very distressing because I value his input, but there's nothing you can do. Him and David Bronner don't seem to want to deal with us.
Well,
we're the ones doing the ibogaine. We're going to sell a lot of ibogaine to these people. The only problem is they've ripped off Bob Cisco in the past. I think they took 200 grams and never paid for it.
Right.
That's worth $195 a gram.
Okay.
GMP.
So on our GoFundMe, Even the Outlaw cut their fee for that $250,000 bail.
I was coming up with the money. They just didn't believe it because I got to do certain things like
a little bit longer. But they only wanted $10,000 for your $250,000 bail. Most of them would have charged $25,000, right? 10%. So they kind of cut it down.
Well, I know they did. They did. But the problem is there was bad vibes. To some extent, it was me hitting him up for a plane fare. When I really didn't have to go there, he just should have
lived in New York City.
Accepted my lawyer's assurances that we were going to get the continuance, and not freaked out and went out Gooding. On the other hand, I just went to Gooding and I got a better result by showing up in person than I would have on the Zoom.
So you gotta when you go to
talk to your attorney, but you can't take them aside and whisper to them.
Yeah. You live in New York City, so you got to fly to Idaho,
right,
to appear in court. That's quite a trip.
That's able to put money into the GoFundMe, which I'm sure you're going to publicize through this. It isn't over.
Yeah.
But during the time that I've been doing this, I've gotten I've been running. So even if I go to jail, I'll just have more money when I get out if they put me in jail for 8 months than I will at 3 months. But on the other hand, my health will have been impaired unnecessarily because basically it's Parkinson's deterioration.
Uh-huh.
And it brings back your faculties, which is great.
Uh-huh. So we do have a GoFundMe. We raised that $10,000 that Even the Outlaw bail bonds there in Idaho needed, and we raised just a little bit more for your expenses. But for people who want to help Dana,
now we're now down to, I think, I just had somebody try to get somebody put the money in. They sent it the other way, so it didn't get to you. I'm trying to get you that other $20.
Oh, don't worry about that.
More
But yeah, so we've raised a little bit over $10,000 so far. Almost all of it has gone to even the outlaw bail bonds, but we've paid off even the outlaw. Now it's just for your trial expenses and stuff. So I think it's GoFundMe.com/free Dana Beal is the GoFundMe. So we'll put the actual address up there as a.
Well, it's something like B7BAE92E.
Oh yeah, that's their code. But if you put in the other name, we'll put it up on the screen here. I'll get it to our guy. So let's go back. How did you first become a marijuana activist or a political activist?
Interesting thing. I went to the I Have a Dream March on Washington.
No, it's 1963.
I'm around in DuPont Circle with the hippies and the queers and the pot smokers would hang out for a couple days trying to get a new demonstration, and I couldn't because there was no context. But flash forward to 1960, mescaline in the kitchen. And we get done and we greet, actually up the street, we're tripping on mescaline a little bit. Look from, we went up First Avenue in the direct traffic and looked to our left at Fifth Street, and there was a whole kind of semi-riot in front of the police station. What it was the cops had dragged away the War Resisters League peace picnic on the tenuous grounds that they were having the picnic on the grass and had put down blankets. And a lot of local people saw this, and a visibly pregnant lady was dragged across the iron fence by the cops. There was a bunch of people went over to the police station, which isn't really that. It's like basically one block over, 2 blocks down, and you're at the police station. So we just got swept up. And what happened the next day, they had a thing up where there was a push Avenue C, not Avenue C, Avenue B and 7th Street. And what it was a bunch of hippies from the suburbs, Solidarity. But you see, meanwhile, the local Puerto Ricans also wanted to show solidarity, but they didn't reach other people. So it wasn't like a riot, right? It was just bad vibes. And what happened was we were going to have this Dead concert in the park in Tompkins. They had a band shell. And we decided to hand out pot because that was the one thing Beacons and the hippies from Connecticut had in common. And it worked. Give a peace spread across the park. Isn't like alcohol, which causes people to. So I told Jerry Garcia, I said, we're having a smoke in here. And he said, well, people smoke pot at all our concerts. But they didn't really. Remember, these guys were busted. Remember, Mountain Girl was busted with Kent Kesey for just having little amounts of pot in California, as well as what happened was because we kept doing these smoking every week, eventually they could arrest somebody for having a roll your own, and they couldn't really prove it was pot. So the judge gave us this end of protection. They have to be close enough to be sure that what you have is to be able to arrest you at a smoke-in. Tobacco. Or probably somebody with weed, which is very bad for your health. Anyway, the way that was all resolved was I was arrested, of course, for 9 hits of acid, which is my personal stash, I was dragooned into selling to this guy who was just a fucking foreman, who said, I can get you a bunch of like white lightning in 2 months if you get me some acid. Now I really need it. What a mistake.
Yeah. Was that your first bust?
That was the first serious bust, yeah. Eventually I ended up doing like 45 days for that.
Uh-huh.
But it was years later.
I see. It dragged out for a while. So,
Well, that's why you got to raise money. It's why you have a GoFundMe, because it's going to take time out of this with the fucking RFK. Not personally. His emissary is apparently over at Con, which is a place the guy kind of supports me. This guy, Cos Martin or something. Cos. I got to get his second name. Marnie, well, anyway, whatever it is, Marty, that's it. Cos Marty. He has
let me ask a question.
Con Body where, his big thing is that he did time for weed and he's selling it legally.
So New York, they have, if you've been busted for pot, you can get preference on a recreational cannabis license, don't they?
See, that's what we're trying to do. Number 9 Bleeper is up for sale. And if people want to help retrieve the Yippie Cafe as an adult use cannabis cafe, the first studying the interface between cannabis and the other plant medicines under a grant from and a grant of authority kind of from the cannabis control. What do they call that here?
I don't know. New York, it's something different every state. Let me ask you more about the what's now the Global Marijuana March.
Yeah.
As I recall, it started as the Million Marijuana March, which was kind of a play off the
Million Man March.
Yeah, the Million Man March.
A million marijuana marchers globally. We couldn't expect to have them all in place. But by doing it all on the same day, you could definitely get into the news cycle.
Right. So you first started with the New York City pot parade there in New York City. That was
and then Giuliani banned it. See, we've gone along. We've been doing it for 26 years. And we were from Washington Square at the behest of some forehead named Sullivan.
But it's grown to where I think at one point it was over 500 different cities around the world participating. Maybe it's
312.
Was that the height?
Yeah, that was the height.
300 and what?
12. I think it was about the year 2002.
I've seen the march in Santiago, Chile, at times with over 400,000 people, and in Buenos Aires, over 200,000 people. And in Medellin, Colombia, they regularly have 30,000 people march. Yeah. We've done it here in Portland. We haven't done it in a few years. I would say we never had more than 700 or 800 people march here in Portland. Yeah. Of course, we're a smaller town. But it's kind of petered out now that marijuana is legal here. But they're still happening on a global basis.
Well, the thing is that the people who are in the States, like Idaho, where they still have 5 to 15 year mandatory minimum because you're into pot, those guys believe that marijuana is coming back. That's the way their minds are working. This is a temporary aberration. That there never will be legalization because they can. It's a personal relationship between Kevin Sabet and the guys in charge of the DEA.
Yeah. So, isn't RFK or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. isn't he against marijuana legalization? I've seen him say it's terrible and it's bad for us.
I heard the opposite. Why is he sending somebody to meet with Conbody?
I don't know. I just know that I read that in the newspaper.
They've been in the newspapers,
Uh-huh.
right? It was another story in the Daily News or the New York Post about this guy, Cause. I'm supposed to be over there right now, but I think they're going to be late again. So I'm just like, taking this because I know I can do this. I waited around
Yeah.
for this other fellow that's part of that scene for showed up.
Well, that sucks. Well, I'm glad you showed up for this one. We're happy to have you on the show here finally. So how did the Million Marijuana March grow to be a global influence? I know we would get posters in the mail.
We got like a major buy-in from London.
Uh-huh. And did they help fund the poster drive? Because we'd get packages.
Well, no, there was a rivalry between the regular people that we knew and this group that was part of the Labor Party, the Youth Auxiliary of the Labor Party. They were leftist. And people attacked them as being freeloaders or something. But that was wrong. You know, what do you do when you have to supply something like Ibogaine, you know, the Trump administration? You know, this is a problem because there's so many other aspects of what they're doing that are a little distressing, shall we say.
Yeah, to say the least.
You know, how can you, well, you got to like work across the aisle. And these guys, if they want to like actually cut the government, they're cutting the government, right? I think they'll find out that we're not ready for the next epidemic, you know, the next pandemic, which might be happening right now with this bird flu. I don't know. How bad is the bird flu they keep talking about? What happens if it crosses over to humans? Is it going to be a mild flu or is it going to be a killer?
Right. Well, the form of it in 1916 was a major killer.
Yeah, that was flu. That was swine flu.
Was it? I thought it was a bird flu.
Southeast or southwest Kansas.
Yeah, it started there, but they called it Spanish flu, but it wasn't.
Well, that was because it broke out in Spain, but it didn't really break out in Spain. What happened was all the American GIs fell to Europe, and it hit Europe. And it basically put the whole war on. That's why they had to have an armistice. People were too sick.
Right. A lot of people died then, that's for sure, all around the world. But hopefully,
they hadn't had a flu like for 40 years. It was really the name. They had something, but it didn't give it any immunity to this strain. I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm. So
we're called ACT UP, the AIDS Coalition.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm like kind of this group within the group because we're doing the drug user caucus, which is the people interested in psychedelic drugs. And they're not that interested in what we're doing. And I'm having to tell them this thing is really coming out. There's going to be a big sensation as it's available for Parkinson's. So you guys, because it's going to be a winner. And there's some few people who still want nothing to do with it. And so I'm going to tell them you have.
Okay. So in terms of your Idaho bust, when is your next appearance in Idaho?
June 4th, but I'm supposed to be on a 20th of May, and I'm trying to get an additional postponement from Rick Doblin writing a letter asking, can I like psychedelic science on the 26th of June, which is obviously after the 4th of June. So I would have to get like my trial postponed another like 3 months. That should be pretty cool. I'm really not into going to jail for 8 months. There has to be something that can be done. Haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah. It was interesting when you were in jail there in the small town of Gooding, Idaho, in Gooding County, Idaho.
Good food.
They had good food, and they gave you a, a tablet, and you could video call and make phone calls from your tablet.
Yep. Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. I didn't know they did
That's where I
that.
want to be, but I still want to be in there for 8 months. And they may actually
Yeah.
get me into a situation where I say, okay, I'll take whatever. I don't want to get 5 to 15. You know.
Yeah, that would be horrible. How old are you now, Dana?
I'm 78.
78. So, yeah, 5 to 15 would be an awful thing.
Well, no, we're not gonna. That's not it. It's a year. The guy says I'm being really generous. Give you a year. And so that leaves.
Right.
Since you get like 10 months on a year in the Gooding County Jail, but not in the state prison. I definitely want the Gooding County Jail because I know the food is good there, and I can get my own. I just need people to send me
I know that
books to read.
you and I were both at the Boise Hemp Fest earlier this year, or last year, and there's another one coming up this year. Are you planning on going to that?
Well, yeah. And the thing is that Sarah Frank wants to do a tour, and this other lady, Leo, wants to also. They're going to introduce other plant medicines into cannabis culture.
Uh-huh.
Like a lot of people, ibogaine, but they don't know that much. Jolie has done a lot of stuff about ibogaine.
Uh-huh.
So the one guy I met in the jail who already knew about it, knew from Joe Rogan.
I see.
And he said, yeah, it rewires the brain.
Tell us more about ibogaine. I know, I met Howard Lotsoff long before he passed.
The capsule is 3 short-acting effects.
Uh-huh.
Cancel out addiction. One is it gets rid of tolerance, right? So you go back to having complete, like you're naive. It's like you never did heroin. So a little bit of heroin will put you under the rug. You can't do the ordinary amount of heroin you did before. It also gets rid of craving through an effect like Wellbutrin. And it gets rid of withdrawal and supersensitization, which is an effect like ketamine. So ketamine for withdrawal. Salvia actually has the effect of getting rid of the tolerance. And Wellbutrin, except it's stronger than Wellbutrin. It's a different set of receptors. Okay, those are the 3 effects that just like stop addiction in its tracks, right? Then there's this other thing that kicks in. Turns out ibogaine turns into something called noribogaine. And noribogaine is like a key that fits into the lock. And that particular lock is called the serotonin transporter, which is the thing that RFK is all upset about, being an SSRI, right?
Okay.
Ibogaine is a typical SSRI because it not only fools the transporter into thinking it's a serotonin, so it can get through like a skeleton key going into a lock. It gets inside the cell, which means that it has a whole complex chemical effect all of its own, and it expresses 3 nerve growth factors. The most important of which is GDNF, or glial-derived neurotrophic factor, which is basically regenerating all the dopamines, right? So you have your receptors back, which is obviously good if you have Parkinson's. And it also does something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is the same thing as psilocybin. And then it has something called nerve growth factor, which is anti-Alzheimer's. So anyway, these 3 nerve growth factors take you in a whole new direction. You stopped right? And you were at a crossroads, right? And then you zoom off to the left instead of zooming off to the right because of the nerve growth factors. Does that explain it?
Okay. I think so. As close as I think I've heard anybody come. I didn't know all of that. So yeah. So
It takes a little while to encapsulate.
do you think RFK is gonna at the health department somehow change the
I have
policy
no
on
idea, but if they can get fucking Eric Adams off, they can get me off.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
just pot, you know.
right. So you're talking about your charge in Idaho.
Why not? Somebody can make a call.
They love Trump in Idaho, I understand.
Yeah. Well, it just depends. You know, the thing is they needed the Ibogaine in Ukraine, but they turned against it. Because people said that's an illegal drug. The answer is you have this drug that's not illegal in Ukraine, make a special law to make it illegal. And they went for that. But that's what's happening. You know, lost voices of fentanyl. We tried to put something about the legal Ibogaine analog. The National Institute on Drug Abuse gave $14.2 million to, called Gilgamesh 3000, drug 3009. And they're not allowed to put it on their website to let people know there is some like a little progress on the treatment front, even though this stuff won't be available until 2030. And they said we can't do it because Ibogaine is illegal. So the idea is to get RFK to simply say that it can't be in a list of with other drugs that have a high potential for abuse because it does not have high potential for abuse. And we can measure that. There's something called place preference with the laboratory rats. And you know, junkies hang out at the junk spot, and crackheads hang out down by the crack spot. Animals, it turns out, will hang out in the part of the cage where they get cocaine, except they won't do that for Ibogaine because Ibogaine is working through a different mechanism. Instead of like directly antagonizing or agonizing the dopamine, it's supporting it with nerve growth factor, which, you know, not only like causes a rewiring, it causes the whole thing to remain young.
So you think perhaps that RFK will change the status?
Well, he said it was absurd that it's in that schedule. I just had this letter from Rick Doblin, which we tried to get to Chuck Schumer, but he wouldn't acknowledge receipt. You know, he was told by somebody. I'm pretty sure who it was, you know.
Well, Rick Doblin, for our audience members, is the founder of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, or MAPS. Mm-hmm. They've been working on various psychedelic studies on their effects for what, 30 years now.
That MAPS was like attacked by Symposia, who torpedoed NMDA, or rather MDMA, for post-traumatic stress disorder, claiming there had been some sexual hanky-panky in one case in this whole big study. And, you know, that was enough to like discredit the whole thing. And there was a big story in the New York Times about this. And this is just the kind of thing that actually the Trumpers are looking for. Because this is people who, you know, use pronouns, right? The name Nice Devenot. These guys claim to be the left, but they seem to be more like anarchists because I mean, you couldn't get more left than the Black Panther Party.
Yeah.
The Black Panther Party has more left-wing street creds than Symposia. That's all.
So the Black Panther Party, they're still active in New York City?
No, the Black Panther Party is working with me to make Ibogaine in Ghana.
Oh, okay.
But I got to get this guy his rent. He gets paid, you know.
Right.
to officiate.
I see. So what's your next step now
Well, get another postponement.
on the trial in Idaho?
Yeah, I'd like to go on
So
on tour with Leo and Sarah, but I would have to be there in May, and that would take money. But of course, by May we may have made money selling Ibogaine. We're supposed to finally get a substantial amount next month.
uh-huh. Well, good luck on that.
So amount you got to understand, it uses half a gram a month to treat these people in Genesis Clinic. Genesis Clinic is the place where the captain from The Deadliest Catch was treated for his heroin addiction. Do you remember that?
Where's this clinic? Where's it at?
It's, I think, in Rosarita, someplace like that,
California.
south of Tijuana.
Oh, in Mexico.
Yeah,
I see.
it's part of California too.
Yeah, yeah. Just the Mexican part.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. I guess
thank God there's some Mexico left, even though they won't let me into the country. I got to get that straightened out when my case is adjudicated. I can't go to conferences in Mexico.
I see. Well, maybe they'll change that. We'll see.
Maybe I'll only get 3 months instead of 8.
Yeah, that would be good, obviously.
Yeah.
So if people are interested to find out more or to help Dana in his case in Idaho, just go to GoFundMe and look up Free Dana Beal. It will pop up there. Free Dana Beal. And so if they were interested in Ibogaine, where do they contact you to find out more about that?
I have a telephone number, which is actually on every leaflet, and it is 347 343 1791. That is, I repeat, 347 343 1791.
All right. Well, we got that out there. And that's the best way to contact you as well.
That it gets me, like sometimes the ringer is turned off. I'm trying to keep the ringer turned on.
Right. So tell us more about your early history with Abby Hoffman.
Well, it's basically like there was a little bit of both people trying to one up the other one. You got to understand that Abby was 30. He did contrive that whole thing where he kicked in the glass at the 9th precinct he had to establish his street cred. He didn't really have it. But I represented the 20-year-olds, which was like the actual generation, right? These were people who had to worry about being drafted and people who were into weed. And when we started doing weed things, a bunch of people came out. The real reconciliation came when Abby wanted me to bring people to the levitation of the Pentagon. And I got a lot of people to go because somehow they came up with the transportation. I came up with 4 pounds of weed, which we gave away in joints, and levitated the Pentagon, you see.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So this was a group of people surrounding the Pentagon there in suburban Washington, D.C.
It wasn't really suburban. It's just really part of like D.C.
Yeah, it's right across the river.
You can basically cross the bridge and get over there. That's what people did.
Right. So there's an iconic photo where there are a bunch of young National Guard people surrounding the Pentagon and a bunch of hippies on the other side. And some guy takes a little flower and puts it in the barrel of his rifle.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the photo that comes to mind when I think about that story, levitating. the Pentagon. You were trying to drive out the bad spirits.
At that point, Abby really kind of thought of me as a resource. And when I got out of jail, I was put in jail for like 3 weeks for apparently something that didn't exist. They just arrested me because they were trying to shut down the 43 East First Street as a location.
Uh-huh.
And I got out, and Abby came to me and said, well, we had this party on New Year's Eve where we started the Yippies, and we want you to bring your entire group of provos, which is what they called our group, was really just a mass of people who wanted to like smoke weed in public. That we want the provos to go to Chicago with the Yippies. Unfortunately, right after that, I split, so I wasn't able to be part of that. The next thing I know, I'm in Vancouver, and there's Abby and Jerry and Stewie Albert with the pig. And I said to people, I know those guys. Those guys are my friends.
Uh-huh. And they were running the pig for president, right?
Right. Pegasus. Yep.
That was, I don't know how many people wrote that one.
He was a candidate of sui generis. Sweet.
That was his slogan.
Well, that's what somebody said.
Uh-huh. Tell us about the 1972 presidential convention. I know you mentioned your interaction with the Democratic nominee, George McGovern, briefly.
Yeah.
But the Yippies were there kind of running different platforms. Is that right?
Well, no, what happened was the other people wanted to like kiss and make up with the Democrats. So they were on the inside. But we still did protests on the outside because people felt the war hadn't stopped and we wanted to end the war. And we got 200 plus people arrested on one thing. But then what happened was they came in and got me because I was sick with this stuff you got from the food in the park. And I had a confrontation with this guy, Caliph. And he brought a gun around, like a shotgun. And I grabbed the gun and took it away from him. It went off in the ceiling. So the cops came. I was arrested, and they claimed that I had pot in my pocket, which I do not believe I had. I think actually they came in and I was naked, and I had to put on my pants because they hit me a couple times. But anyway, we got to court, and the judge said, they said we were searching for a gun in the fucking, shotgun in the guy's front pocket. And the judge said no. So it was all thrown out.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was it. It was the end of it. It was like, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know Abby was going to get busted for coke, for 3 kilos of coke, which I had to get him off of. I did actually successfully get Abby off of doing life for the Rockefeller drug law, because it was 3 kilos of cut. But if you put 9 ounces of real pure coke into 6 pounds of lidocaine, technically it's 3 kilos of cocaine under the law.
Right.
So he was facing a long time, and we got him off with 7 months. The other thing,
he went under in the middle of that.
Yeah,
he went underground several years.
It was after he came back. See, we did the Bring Abby Home thing on the night of the height of the Chicago riots 10 years earlier at the Felt Forum. And it influenced Morgenthau to give Abby a deal where if he would denounce heroin chic, right, that they would, because, they said, oh, there's a difference between cocaine and heroin, which, there is in a way a difference between cocaine and heroin, but cocaine people are very hard to deal with. They're not reliable.
Uh-huh. Well, I think, you can say that about a lot of folks, right? But,
well, yeah, I mean,
I don't really know anybody who.
Look at it this
Yes.
way. Did you see the thing on the guy that was busted for plotting to kill FBI agents after he was pardoned. And he said, well, the pardon should like include this because it's all part of the other case. And I was planning to kill the FBI agents. It's covered under Trump's pardon. Well, then you go into the story. It turns out this guy had a girlfriend who was a Trumper. And, they got into like violent fights over nothing. And she said, the guy is just deranged. He's mentally unstable. Well, you know what Trump did in the beginning? He said, are you mad at the government? Come over here in my corner. All the people who are mad at the government should join my movement. That was basically not 2016. That was what he said. Well, you're going to get a few people that are an actual threat to public safety. Just a few. So they just had to weed out a few bad apples, right? It's like everything. The police force, you got to get rid of the bad apples. Can't be having bad apples.
So we're almost out of time here, Dana. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing here?
I got a call I'm getting on my phone.
Don't take that yet.
Oh no, I don't have to take it. Well, keep tuned in. This stuff with Ibogaine is very, very interesting. We have a chance because of the fact that you have this whole army of guys, like 1,000 veterans have gotten over traumatic brain injury with Ibogaine. That's a huge political juggernaut in itself. And now, the Parkinson's people are coming. Joe Rogan, Rick Perry, and Brian Hubbard showcasing and multiple sclerosis. This is all microdose. This is not the big scary dose for heroin. This is just people taking as a supplement, a tonic, nerve tonic. Anyway, keep tuned into the interesting thing because we have a chance to actually change the law on that one drug.
All right. Well, we've had Dana Beal on the show here, a lifetime activist, starter who helped start the Global Cannabis March, worked with Abby Hoffman, has been an Ibogaine activist, busted I don't know how many times for pot, but you're currently going through a trial in Idaho, a small town, Gooding, Idaho. So if you want to help Dana, just go to GoFundMe and look up Free Dana Beal, and you can give a little.
Should we get him to write letters to the judge?
Yeah, write letters to the judge. There's only one judge and one magistrate in Gooding County.
It's a lady. It's a lady.
If you send a letter to the judge in Gooding County, you'll find Gooding is the headquarters of Gooding County. Well, thank you, Dana. Just keep working to restore hemp, and we'll be there to support you. Thank you.